All right, shall we start? Gil, looks like you have the first item on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Weston. Also, I've got to drop at 11:15. Sorry, so I don't think this is contentious, and hopefully I won't like start a huge thing and then have to bail. So I have just some quick questions about how other people are managing it. We've got the new Substrate Python package and repo under the Substrate org. It's not doing anything particularly complicated. It's really just the kind of the generated Python code from the Substrate protos. And I don't think that any of the language-specific repos are like obviously requiring two approving reviews from the SMC, right? It's not the upstream like main repository, but how are there any guidelines on, like, do I have free reign as a committer? Or, are there sort of general guidelines we want to try to follow? Is it just have a committer approve each PR? Is it, and just anybody's thoughts, or if we've written this down anywhere?
I don't remember off the top of my head if the government doc says anything, and it sounds like it probably doesn't. I believe I had probably just been kind of implicitly following the Apache model then, which is any committer is welcome to commit whatever they think is appropriate. And, unless if there is question or kind of conflict or back and forth or something like that, we would raise it to the discussion list and hold a vote somewhere. But okay, I imagine that would be quite rare.
There is something in the governance docs, I think, which is votes on code modification. Which is for code modification, votes a +1 vote. Review approvals on GitHub are considered +1 or considered equivalent to a +1 are in favor of the polls. I think that might apply to the language-specific projects, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I'll link to the thing if I can.
Yeah. Then I can propose something, I think, modifying that then, because I honestly, I think it's onerous at this point for, like, it's one thing to make like a big change to the actual like spec itself. In this case, like I'm talking about, adding commitlets and things that are pretty light touch. But
can you, I mean, happy to see what you mean by that clarification, but from what Victor just said, it sounded like an approved PR counts as a vote, and you only need one vote, and therefore all you need is PR approval to merge something in, like one approving review to merge a PR would be my interpretation.
One approving review from a committer, though, yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. I'll have to bribe somebody. Richard, probably you. Okay, that's great. Thank you for the clarification. That's very helpful.
Well, it sounds like you're interpreting that as a committer other than yourself.
I was interpreting it that way.
I also interpret it that way, actually. So.
Ah, okay.
You can't approve your own. GitHub won't let you approve your own. So I mean, it sort of enforces it has to be somebody else.
Well, that also assumes that the particular repository has it set up such that all PRs require an approval. But yeah, I think that I'll go with get another committer to approve something for the moment, and I can always revisit this if it becomes a problem. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't doing anything egregious.
Yeah, I would personally say that, for small things, self-approval is probably fine, but it would be a best practice to set up the repo so that, you do need to require approval. Because there have been times where, the build is broken or something like that, and I go through and I realize that, oh, this thing expired, or this setting no longer works, or we need to change this version of the dependency or something like that. But I think it's fine to say, yeah, one approval from someone else. So I would say it's ambiguous, but it sounds like no one is too worried about interpreting it as one approval from someone else.
Okay.
I would say that is different from the Apache model, or at least how I'm used to working on it in the Apache model. You can kind of approve your own changes and just commit them in, and you don't need someone else to take a look at them formally if you have right permission. So.
The second item I put on the agenda is more of an announcement, I guess. But just since many of the people affected are in this call, I would just say we'll do it here, which is that Weston and I merged in Mateus's very old PR to automatically generate the like committers and SMC members and put their affiliations on the website. And we also discovered right after we did that, the token that is on the Substrate repo only is able to pull that information if your membership in the Substrate org is public. And you'd be amazed how few people's membership in the Substrate org is public. It's 4. And it's only 4 because I just made mine public. And I don't think we're hiding this. I think it's just the way that the organization was configured so that when new members get added, you default to being private. So there's a link in the agenda. If you click on that, it should bring you to the list of members, and only on your username you can change your membership to be public, which is probably also generally a good idea if we're trying to associate ourselves publicly with the organization. And that's it for me.
Yeah, I'm tempted to just go the access token route, so that's not needed, but we can continue to discussion on that PR. But it's probably, I agree, a good idea for everyone to mark their membership as public, especially since it will be implicitly public if we go the route that we had before, where we just listed on the page.
So if that topic has, we have reached conclusion there. The next one I had just added as a follow-up of the meeting we had last time. And there are 2 topics which I wanted to follow up on. First was about the Substrate Spark extraction from the Gluten project. And I just wanted to know if there are any updates. And I sent a mail to Weston also offline, but I think it would be better to discuss in the community and so that we are all on the same page. It is definitely something which our team is very interested in, and we would like to learn more if any progress happens anywhere.
Yeah, I know that Weston connected us by email, also Ashwin. I think I can get in touch with some of the people at Intel who I've spoken with in the past about this. But I think when I responded to you last by email, I think what would be helpful is just a bit more context about what our goals are, so that because we've had some previous conversations with the Intel team about this, and I want to make sure that we're like tying it to any context that was, previously discussed. So yeah, if you can give a bit more detail, that would be really helpful, and then we can start that conversation, I think.
Right. I think I was also introduced to this the idea of extraction last time. I didn't know, so I think it was Matan or probably Jack who started this conversation. What I know is that we have a dependency on that in some of the prototypes we are building internally. So if I have to add my own opinion to it, I think it makes sense. Right now, if I look at the gluten repository, that is a lot driven by what Verilog supports and what ClickHouse supports, and most of the commits happen in those 2 areas, whereas the gluten project itself may be behind Substrate, right? That's what I believe it is happening there. So if it is closer to Substrate project, I think it can stay up to date with the latest specification. And then even if the underlying hardware is not supporting some of the operations which Substrate or Gluten can do the conversion of, then also it should happen, and then the hardware should accordingly decide. So that is, I just wanted to say that I do support it, and Intel, we are building some prototypes where we have dependency on it. So if this thing goes forward, then I definitely want to be aware of it and be prepared for it when that happens. So that is from my side. Maybe Matan and others who are involved in earlier conversations could add.
Yes, we said last time we should find the authors and somehow coordinate around the extraction or cooperate around the extraction. And you guys said that they did not have time to do it. So I tried to find through Slack. I did not get any response. Who to ask? So if any of you guys know, like an email or a person that I can contact, not through Slack, because it might be they're not like active on the Substrait Slack, then I can try another channel.
Yeah, I think that the folks at Intel are mostly not on the Slack, and a lot of them are based in China, all throughout other time zones. So in the past, there hasn't been much in the way of synchronous communication. I don't think they've ever joined this meeting. But I can send an email. I'm still a little uncertain about what, I know there was a discussion in a previous call about this, but I'm still unclear on what part of gluten we're proposing to move into Substrate. I mean, I don't know. Forgive me if I forget what the context is, but in general, right? There's a bunch of Spark plan translation stuff. Is the idea that would move into Substrate proper?
Specifically, there's a part called Substrate Spark in the core of gluten, which is serialization, like back and forth from Substrate of Spark logical plans. I think they have more parts which we did not touch, so I'm not familiar with, which also do parts of physical plans when it comes to the backends of gluten. In speed data for our company, we are interested in the logical part, which is called Substrate Spark. And it's also, by the way, what we do now internally is we just use it as a sub module, or you can really only use this part. So in terms of using it as is, it's not very difficult now, but I think it was said that it's better to somehow coordinate the work on this this module with the progress of Substrate. And internally, by the way, we even implemented some new functions there for everyone to use. So it would be nice to extract and then add on top of that. Like everyone would add on top of that and not internally, like it's being now.
Okay.
We added functions. We added support of we're adding now support of new scan operations from different sources, which they don't have now. So really nice if everyone would look at the same source.
I think that was actually a great explanation. I can provide just a slight bit more context to Ian. I'll put this link in the chat as well as the meeting notes for this PR to Substrate Java. So this PR was made a long time ago, so don't assume it's up to date. It was made back in September, which was an attempt at adding Spark Substrate bridge to the Substrate Java repository. That was not part of gluten, as I understand. And so the first response that came back was, well, we've done something like this in gluten. Maybe we could use that. And then you can kind of read through the discussion, but it ends with, we've already integrated Substrate Spark in gluten. Due to schedule pressure, we put it in gluten and not upstreamed here. Would anyone like to do migration from gluten to Substrate Java? So that's, I think, where we want to pick up from. And I haven't followed all this discussions recently, so I don't know if they're saying that they took this PR and they merged that into gluten and that's what became Substrate Spark, or if Substrate Spark was something that was done independently and we have to kind of glance at the two PRs and pick one. But that was the existing conversation that happened like 6 months ago or 7 months ago. And so it's kind of stale and out of date, but you could reach out to those people or you could reach out to any of the gluten. You know,
Does it look like the same classes? You know, it looks different.
Yeah,
So,
I think it was done in parallel, and if I recall the discussion correctly, it was something along the lines of, this is good, but maybe we should just use what's in gluten.
Okay, so one thing I'm unclear on is it do we agree in principle that the translation from Spark plan format to Substrate should exist in a Substrate repository? Because I think we're talking about two things. One, we're talking about like when you have a Spark flavored Substrate plan, you might need some methods in order to convert it to more of a physical plan that matches Spark semantics, Spark like physical plan semantics. And that I can understand as consisting of methods which would, it seems sensible that that would exist in Substrate. But the conversion of a non-Substrate formatted Spark plan to Substrate format it just seems unclear to me whether Substrate project, the core Substrate project, is actually the appropriate place for that to reside. I don't know. Can someone clarify that? I mean, and this PR seems like evidence that maybe people would take different approaches at it.
Actually, the closest thing I can think of for an analog to that is actually Isthmus, where I don't actually think that Substrate Java should care about SQL parsing, and it actually doesn't. It's like the core spec is just the Substrate core. The Isthmus is like the SQL, it's the SQL to Substrate via CalSet bridge. And I can imagine having different submodules for Spark and like other engines. I agree with you that I don't think Substrate Java itself cares about Spark directly, but we might want to have the ability to, like a library that uses the core Substrate Java to integrate with Spark. I can imagine integrations of other engines as well.
Yeah, I mean, right. If there was a separate Substrate Spark repo, and and there was a plan to add this there, I mean that would seem sensible. It's just, I don't know.
I would choose
Gluten already has a dependency on Substrate Java already.
yeah, this is how it's built now. It's just in gluten.
But it's outdated. I think they're still on version 5, and what we have a Substrate Java version is 11. Although in 5 to 11, not many things changed, but that is
enough has changed that they're gonna. I was wondering why no one would be complaining about breaking changes. That's probably one of the reasons is they haven't updated it.
That is exactly the point I was making, and this is actually a double-edged sword, as Ian was talking about, right? So it is outdated because it moves by what the backends can support, what Velox and ClickHouse primary targets, or maybe now speed data, whatever is required for their workloads. So that is what they need, and if they don't need anything, they don't upgrade to Java version, for example. But the second thing is that because of which it stays more up to date, also because it's closer to Spark, it's closer to the backends, and if there, anything changes, they're able to push things back and forth very fast. So what Ian asked is a good question. At first, we have to all come to a consensus that what are the decision factors which help us decide whether we want to move it here or not. In the last meeting, I think Jack also mentioned this, that there is a lot of traction and a lot of Spark users are looking at this. We are looking at it. Speed Data is looking at it. So this definitely has more audience than what the Gluten project itself targets. And Spark has a very rich community. I mean, that's evident.
So I guess I'll ask then you, Ashvin and Matan, is what you're asking for, what you would like to see is some kind of conversion tool like what's in the Gluten repo that converts from a Spark plan to a Substrate plan.
And back, yeah. Which also exists there. They also have that. Of course, it's not complete, like we said. It's almost complete and outdated. I think internally we've fixed the breaking changes. I'm used the newer version of Java, but should be done for everyone to use. That's the point.
Okay. And so back to Victor and Ian, your other point, which is this, I think we all agree this probably doesn't belong as part of Substrate Java. It's a separate jar or whatever that depends on Substrate Java. But would it still make sense to put it in the Substrate Java repository? Or should it be a separate project in the Substrate workspace? Separate repo.
You mean what kind of contrib section?
Sorry, I missed what you said, David.
Like perhaps in a contrib section?
Yeah, like Isthmus is in the Substrate Java repository, even though it's not part of the core Substrate Java jar. Creating a repo is a bit of a headache, and you have to have separate CI and all that kind of stuff for it. So I think my automatic default would be the same repo. But
I think the same repo makes a lot of sense, especially given that we're like pre 1.0, the ability to make changes that will affect the Substrate Spark in a way that might need. If it's in the same repo and I make a breaking change, I can fix the Substrate Java consumer like directly in that change as well, rather than having to track down the users of it. Like the mono repo Java approach works well for that. And I think it also makes it easier for people to find what they're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important that we create some logical separation, but that doesn't need to mean separate repo. I mean, I think Isthmus, right? If we take the same approach with Isthmus, we treat it as a logically separate component, but it's in the same repo. We create different sort of tags for it, expect that people who are filing issues use the prefixes or tags or whatever specific to the Spark component. That makes sense. Yeah, but I think creating some separation in the same way that Isthmus is logically separate is important.
Yeah. And I mean, given that some of that code is Scala, we would want a separation in the repo anyways. So I don't think we want Calcit users having to pull that dependency in, or Substrate Java users having to pull that dependency in.
Yeah, I guess the other question is just to sort of game theory this out for a little bit. So Gluten is Apache 2 licensed. So if for some reason just we ask Intel about this and they don't have any immediate plans or willingness to upstream the relevant pieces from Gluten into this new component in Substrate Java. What then? Like, is there, should we just think about forking Gluten, maybe using, this the downstream fork that you all are working on at Speed Data? Like, I don't know, what's the plan then?
Something like that, yeah. This is what we discussed more or less last time, I think.
Okay.
We have very few additions, so we can start from there, but we wanted to get their blessing, I guess, and I just couldn't find any of them. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't go into much detail of what would happen if they don't give us their blessing, but the assumption is that they probably don't mind. this is taking work off of their plate because technically it's something they would have to maintain as well. So.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, another thing that I know that the gluten team has done is they have a fork of Substrate itself, and they've made additions to that fork of Substrate, if I understand correctly. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit in pulling all this back upstream into Substrate proper, and trying to get the folks at Intel to cooperate on this. But I think there is a significant chance that they'll just get hung up by some either unforeseen technical issue, or by some like bureaucratic obstacle. But even if that is the case, hopefully, if that happens, we can still get them to say something along the lines of, "We understand. If you need to fork it, go ahead." All right, yeah. Matan, I'm not sure if I have your email address, but if you could drop it in the chat, I can Ashvin, I have your email address, so I can send an introduction with everyone included, and I can explain the context.
I see. So just to clarify, right, what we are saying is that this module will be abstracted from gluten. It will no longer live in gluten project. That's the ideal scenario, right? And then that way Substrate is not forked in gluten as well, which also means that adding this new jar as a dependency in gluten project and maintaining any updates of that in the gluten project will be owned by, probably will as a community will contribute to it as well, right?
Would we own the gluten side of things, or would they be if they want to make if they make an update to Substrate Spark, we ship it as a new version? Would that be our responsibility to update it for them, or would they want to pull in the version and update it on their end? I guess I'm thinking if we provide like a general, like here is a Spark module for Substrate Java, you can convert Spark plans back and forth. Gluten may be one consumer of that because they're doing Spark stuff, but other people might want to do it. Like in the same way that I can imagine, like here's Substrate Trino, here's Substrate, I don't know, Flink, I don't know, things like that of that nature, where we provide like here's mappings back and forth between these two systems, but how you choose to use it. And that actually also provides an interesting leverage point as well, where if we're providing these sub-libraries, if there are like non-standard relations in those engines that we haven't decided how to standardize on, the module itself could define like here's some custom extensions, role extensions that we use to convert back and forth. Or like maybe we had extraction rather than adding to the core spec, we added as here's a custom extension of protobuf that you can use that kind of maps to it. And if people use it enough and we figure out how we want to do it, we can import it into the core spec. It also gives us a way to kind of support these engines in a specific way. So about having to add stuff to the core spec, but about having to ask people to figure out the extension mechanism.
Yeah, to answer your earlier question, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I imagine normally what happens is we come up with a new and improved Substrate Spark, and we go and we say, hey, we upstreamed this, and we made some updates to it, and we updated it to the latest version. And then they can either choose to adopt it, which will require change on their end in other parts of gluten, because we will have made breaking changes, or not. And if they choose not, because they don't have time, then they could probably say, well, we don't have time to do this, but if you wanted to make a gluten PR that updated to start using this, that would be a good idea. And then they would push to work on us. So it could go any of those ways, I think. Or they could say, we want to keep this in our control. We don't want to have to be bound to changes that might get made to the Substrate Spark component. So we're just going to keep it as a separate thing, which would be unfortunate, but within their rights to do so, I think.
Makes sense. I have one more question. If I'm not taking up entire time, can I? So this is to put probably Matan and Ian. So you mentioned that you're only talking about the logical plans, and they have additional components in the physical path, physical plan conversion, and also the gluten project. From Substrate perspective, from project perspective, it would make sense that both live in the Substrate either, right? And from gluten perspective, they would not want a split brain, that half of the dependencies are coming from Substrate project, Substrate Java, and the other half is coming from gluten project itself. I foresee that as a potential issue. I just wanted to make sure that we have some roadmap there.
Yeah, I personally, I don't know a lot about the physical parts. It seems like it's less, I mean, the logical part is very uncoupled to the rest. You can see it's like a very small module. You have the serializer to substrate and back. It's pretty straightforward. The other parts are more, I mean, we did not look at it in depth, so I don't know a lot about it. So this is why we, and also we in Speedator, we don't look at it because we do like we do this we do our thing very differently with the hardware when we use the logical plans, and we don't pass any physical nodes to the code generation to what we use the substrate for. So this would be, we will have to maybe ask them in the email what they think. But the substrate spark, what they call substrate spark now, is logical, and it's separated from the rest.
And even if they, like, from looking, the engine we're using primarily uses like the logical parts of the substrate core spec, and we have a, like, for example, project we kind of use in both logical space and physical space, because project is, I don't need a specialized project relation for my engine, but we do have some specialized like nodes in our operator tree effectively. And for those, we just use custom extensions at this point. And I think the fact that Substrate Java now, you can actually use custom extensions and you can kind of pipe them through end to end, means that if we do run into any like Substrate Java specific physical operators that aren't just like gluten specific variants, like those might be things that we can include in like the sub module as like, if you want to try to omit physical plans, here are some nodes that we've provided for you to use that kind of map to those operations. And then if there's very gluten specific things that are not like, you know, substrate standard, Spark standard physical plan stuff, the extension mechanism also means that they can also add those in as well. Extensions are really useful.
Yes, we've been, you know, that's similarly, that's our default for, this doesn't exist in Substrate. You know, in Acero, our default posture, at least my default posture, is not, well, let's go put it in Substrate. It's, okay, let's do an extension for now, and then we can think about putting it into Substrate later. Like we have as of join as an extension at the moment. We did try to put that one into Substrate. It didn't go so well. So we may come back and try that again as we start to understand it more, or as others, probably more importantly, as other engines also have their own as of join. And then it's more of a, okay, let's synthesize between these two instead of trying to standardize based on one implementation. So I think that's a really good idea, Victor. Now, I will mention that we have been saying several times during this conversation that we can move this into a Substrate owned repository, and then, you know, it will be under our control and we can keep it up to date and we can fix it. But it's not clear who exactly is doing the work here when we talk about we. So there's still going to be work here and we'll still need people to do it. But it sounds like Ashvin, Matan, Victor are all nominally agreeing that they can put some time into this.
Yeah, I think that that's likely to be like a sticking point for Intel, is like, well, great, yes, we're in principle willing to assist with upstreaming this, but then like we're dealing with a repo that we have no write access to immediately. And so implicit in, I think the message to them is like, you know, the solution here is to deal with a little bit of pain until you've demonstrated that you're a responsible committer on this project and, you know, get added as a committer and maybe an SMC member, and then like it ultimately will be in a better situation going forward. But that may be an obstacle.
There's also a meta question of, do we want Scala in the project? This is more from like a reviewer perspective of, you know, Substrait Java is already Java, it's a lot of it. We want to have people contributing to it also need to know, oh, I made a change in Substrate Java and it broke Substrate Spark in a way I need to fix. Oh, I don't know Scala, I need to go handle that. Like, that kind of makes it less of a fork and more of a port in some ways.
I mean, power to whoever's doing the work.
That's fair.
So, yeah, if there's no activity for 4 weeks and then someone jumps in and builds a Spark to Substrate converter in Python and it's fully compatible, then we'll add it to the list. You know, if we want to build it in Java, great. If we want to use Scala, great. I think, you know, they're called it implementer's prerogative or something. All right, I think we may have reached the end of this topic. Does anybody have any other topics?
Jack is not here, but the other action item we had discussed last time was about the annotations versus hints, and I think that is something, again, I wanted to use in one of the, so we want to put the query hash in the query plan so that we can identify it. Again, it's like a debugging information so that we can relate back to what is happening. Probably when Jack is here, that is he was assigned this, or he took ownership of that, volunteered to work on it, right? So probably we can wait for him.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think anyone would be, I don't think he would mind if you wanted to make a stab at it either. Just
okay.
I can't speak for Jacques, but I know he's been busy.
Sounds good. I'll maybe start with this query hash, see how this, start on a Slack channel, and we can see where we can push.
Yeah, it didn't sound last time like Jacques had gotten much further than sort of a proof of concept in his head. Yeah, I don't think he's done a lot of concrete implementation work. So, you know, if you want to draft up a design document or something like that, or a sketch of, you know, more specifically what approach you'd like, that would probably be the best way to move that forward.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. We can stare at each other awkwardly for another 2 more minutes, or we can.
One very quick question, just about the whole Substrate Spark module thing. So I know that like with Apache Foundation projects, right, when code is being donated in some bulk way to the project, it triggers this whole big like separate process that we need to carry out. Is there something other than just like a PR is opened and reviewed and merged that needs to happen if there's a large amount of Substrate Spark module code being donated to Substrate?
That's a great question. I can, yeah, expand a little on the, there's a template in Apache if you're doing a large import of code, where basically you get signatures from every person that has made a commit to that code. Essentially, like if you're going to bulk import some code from one repository to another, you would want to reach out to all of the committers and attempt to get a, what's it called, a CLA signed from all of the committers that contributed to the original work. So I think some of it will depend on how we pull the changes over. You know, if they were changed, kind of we pull them over as is, a bulk import of the repo. That seems like something that Apache's lawyers at least have decided is a good thing to have. If it were more of a port, you know, if it's converted from like Scala to Java or something like that, and it came in as one big commit or something like that, then it would seem less. We're getting into a gray area. I don't really know. So that's a good question. I'll drop in the link for the IP clearance template that Apache has, in case anyone wanted to take a look at it. I guess I will take the action to send something to the mailing list and decide if we need to bother with that or not.
Thanks, Weston. Yeah, and just to be clear, like when another component that's maintained in a separate repo is already licensed under an Apache 2 license, as Gluten is, like there's no real need to do this. It's just that it's like I mean, it's all about due diligence. Like it is completely within the rights of a project to just grab any Apache 2 code, you know, and yoink it out and put it somewhere else, right? That's like what the license says. But intellectual property doesn't really matter there. But there's just so yeah, I think there's just enough risks that even within the Apache 2 license, the ASF has recognized that like still need to go through this process to make sure there's not some blowback. But it's not strictly legally necessary.
Seems polite. And also,
Yeah.
I think if someone's going to do this, I would probably recommend they update the version in Substrate Spark to begin with before trying to do an import, because it's going to have all sorts of fun conflicts otherwise.
Yeah. So just to comment on what Ian was saying, right? That's a trade-off. We don't want two Substrate Java projects to exist, right? We can fork it, but a fork is a poison pill, right? Slow poison pill, and it creates more confusion, in my opinion. And the value addition, it's not more important than having updated there. So if the gluten, in other words, if the gluten community is not ready to take a dependency on Substrate Java project here from Substrate, then it's probably not worth it, is what I say. I see a risk there, in my opinion. I don't know what others think.
I see. So you're saying, if I understand correctly, that if the Gluten project were to look at this and decide not to integrate it within Gluten, then it might not be worth doing this work in the first place.
Correct. I mean, we need everyone, at least a consensus there from the Gluten project. Also, other things, also the legal matters and all, they are definitely very important, but the non legal aspects also, I think as a community, they if they do continue maintaining their own version of Substrate, a fork of Substrate, and we maintain a fork of Substrate Java, then it is counterproductive.
The thing I'll say about that is they already at least depend on Substrate Java already. So that would be more a matter of moving the code for it out of the Gluten repo into the Substrate Java repo. I can't speak to the Substrate spec itself, but their Substrate Spark work extends from the existing Substrate Java work already. There's a concrete dependency being implemented already. The main difference would be if it's in Substrate Java, that means I have to kind of go through our PR review process, which is like potentially a bottleneck, but or
Okay. Do we want to set up any kind of Slack channel just for this effort? Sounds like we have several people involved from several different organizations. Waiting every 2 weeks to talk about the next step in the community meeting might not be the best approach. Does that sound like a reasonable idea? Let's just create something in Slack for those who are interested in this conversion so that we can post updates there rather noisily as we do any kind of thing related to this.
Spark makes sense.
I'll create something real quick.
Thank you, Winston.
I think on my end, I probably can't do any kind of porting work, but I'm more than happy to review anything that comes in. I was saying that people might have issues with Scala. I have done Scala before, so I can't actually review it.
I'm just speaking for some folks in my team who are working on that module. So I myself, I'm just looking at the substrate part of it. Someone was looking at gluten, and that is when I just representing them right now. So I learned Scala in the process, I believe.
Also, just like looking at the OAP project gluten repo, it looks like the place that this Substrate Spark module lives is in a Substrate subdirectory in the repo. But they haven't forked Substrate Java there, but it's like, I think they've, the code, like the Substrate Spark module sort of assumes that it's in the same like file tree as the rest of the Substrate Java modules. So I mean, is it just a matter of like, would it cleanly copy over into the Substrate Java modules if it was up to date? I mean, I don't know much about Java, so I'm just trying to understand whether, in addition to these political challenges and so forth, we there's also like just a logistical challenge of moving the code over. But it doesn't look like there is.
Dima from my team, he works on it a bit, so if we add him to the channel, maybe we can ask there.
Okay.
Weston is, I write his name. Right, can I add the people in the channel?
Should be able to.
Okay. No, I can't. Oh, yeah, okay.
There we go. All right. Any other thoughts?
Good here. I'll have discussions internally, and I'll keep you guys updated about this work. Thank you.
Have a good week, everyone.
Good day. Bye-bye.